Bonjour, aujourd'hui vous prenez des notes sur deux verbes et les adjectifs en français. First, we're going to take a look at the present tense of verbs like écrire. We have three verbs: to describe, to write, and to record or to enroll is inscrire. We see that in the plural forms, the nous, vous, and ils, that there is a V that shows up. And so this is different than the conjugations we've seen for other verbs like this in the present. Next, we have the verb s'asseoir, which is to sit down. We see that it's reflexive. And often you've heard this verb as a command in class, but it's also important to know how to conjugate it in the present tense. Here I've given you one acceptable set of conjugations. This verb actually has two ways that you can conjugate it. If you're familiar with the other way, that's perfectly fine. But for today, we're just going to focus on these 6 forms here. Next, we're going to continue with adjectives in French. So we are used to adjectives, and we are used to the idea that adjectives need to agree in number and gender. Often what we do with adjectives in French is add an E to the end to make it feminine or add an S to make it plural, but we're going to take a look at some notable exceptions. We have an example of the adjective cher, which means expensive. And here we can see the 4 different forms of this adjective. We see that for the feminine forms, we actually have to add an accent grave before we can add the E or ES at the end. We're also going to take a look at adjectives that end with EUX or EUR, like heureux, happy. And we see here the masculine forms are the same. The feminine forms are EUSE or EUSES. At the bottom, there are some exceptions to this rule. French is full of exceptions. For example, with the adjective meilleur, we've never said meilleuse, but we'll just add an E. And so with these notes after today, it's not important to have completely memorized all of the different forms, but it's important to start recognizing some of the patterns. So we'll hopefully work on that throughout this chapter. Here are some more irregulars. We have adjectives that end with TEUR, such as créateur. And again, in the feminine forms is where we see the big difference. Créateur becomes créatrice. There's adjectives that end with ET, like complet. And similarly to with the adjective cher, we're adding an accent grave. And again, on this page, I've shown you some exceptions to the rules. It's just as a reference, so that way if you come across them, you know. Here we have adjectives that end with AL, like normal. The masculine plural form looks much different from the masculine feminine. Instead of AL, now we end it with AUX. You guys might remember this from the noun animal in French, one animal, but several animaux, or with the word horse, un cheval, des chevaux. And the feminine forms look a lot more like the singular masculine form. So it's really the plural masculine form that sticks out. And again, some exceptions. The adjective final actually has 2 possible forms for the plural. You can say finaux or you can say final with an S. Here are some common adjectives which don't change at all. Brown, orange, cheap, chic, and snob. There are several adjectives in French where when you make it feminine, we have a double consonant. So the masculine for bon, good, becomes bonne. We have the masculine and then feminine for the word nice. Gras or grasse means like fatty and can mean greasy as well. Gros and gross means big or large or fat. Many nationalities do this, so Italian, natural, clear or precise, and then similar. These adjectives are irregular, but they have significant spelling changes from the masculine to the feminine form. We have the word for white, favorite, long, public, and dry. We know that for the most part, adjectives go after the noun in French. You guys may have learned the acronym BAGS to talk about adjectives that go before the noun. For this set of notes, we're going to modify that acronym and call it BANGS instead. So for beauty, age, numbers, goodness, and size, all of these adjectives should go before the noun in French. Here we have some common adjectives which behave a little bit differently. These adjectives, if they are going to go before a noun and that noun starts with a vowel or an H, they have a special form. So on the top row, going across, we have the regular masculine singular form. So we have beautiful, crazy, soft, new, and old. Below it, we have the masculine singular form if it's starting or preceding a vowel or the letter H. So, for example, if you want to say a handsome man, you have to say un bel homme. And we see that this letter L is common across all 5 of these forms. Then we have the feminine singular, the masculine plural, and the last row across is the feminine plural. Finally, we have a set of common adjectives that actually change meaning depending on whether you put them before the noun or after the noun. So in the left-hand column, we have the adjective. On the middle column, we have what it means if you place it before the noun. And on the right-hand column, we have what it would mean if you place it after the noun. So if you want to talk about your teacher from last year, that would be l'ancien prof. But if you have a teacher who's very old, le prof ancien. Dernier is one of the adjectives that maybe you've heard or are most familiar with. If you say la dernière semaine, you're saying that it's the final week, like the last week of school, potentially. If you say la semaine dernière, you're talking about 7 days ago. You're saying last week when something else happened. And there you have it. We looked at 2 different verbs, 2 different types of verbs in the present tense, and irregular forms of adjectives in French. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in class tomorrow. A bientôt.